Do you want me to leave time at the end for your one-man show at the end, or give a little performance?
Happy to.
Okay, who do we got online? We got Amber, Ryan, Vicky,
Yep.
Crystal.
Yep, I'm here.
Great.
I think it's only Margaret missing.
Okay. Okay, well, it's 5 o'clock. It's July 25th, 2022. The Ad-Hoc Committee of the Sidewalk commence. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So the goal of tonight's meeting is to revisit, the sidewalk law and how we can make this a reality if we choose to go down this route. I know this started over 4.5 years ago. And, with the Ithaca model was kind of, a sampling back then, but since then there's been other municipalities that kind of branched off into utilizing, this kind of format in their own way. Some with good results, some with somewhat results, and still some ongoing. So I'm hoping that tonight's meeting will get us some solid information to dwell on, to think about, and then come August, because it's going to be a process we can roll up our sleeves and figure out what's going to fit Hudson, moving forward, and try to tackle, each issue that could be prevented for down the road for being biting us. So I know Crystal's been working hard on researching it. I think Michael has some information too. So what I'll do is I'll give it to Crystal to give us, a little bit of background, and and then where we are, what we could do, and some of our options, and then we'll have a little discussion. Go ahead, Crystal.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. So in looking at what the city has, or what the council has kind of reviewed in the past, it does look like there is a there's written legislation for a sidewalk district that was probably put together maybe 2 or so years ago, fashioned off of the Ithaca model. It's almost identical, really, to what Ithaca has in place. I know that there have been other municipalities that have since also enacted sidewalk districts. You can see it in the city of Schenectady. Syracuse enacted one not too long ago. Schenectady enacted theirs several years ago, but had a lot of hiccups based on how they handled the pricing on it. They undervalued, I guess, the construction that was involved with it, which resulted in a lot of angry residents. And then you have other municipalities, which I believe one of them I came across, I think it was Waterford. And what they did is they did an opt-in. So they asked for residents or property owners to opt into the district and offered them incentives, such as a 50% reduction in the cost of the repairs. That is a little bit of a more difficult solution, because if you have residents that are, or property owners that are not opting in, you're going to have just as many difficulties getting your sidewalks repaired and maintained as you essentially are now, or you're going to have it kind of set up so that some blocks are being repaired throughout the city and others aren't. Others are going through the same process you're going through now. So I don't necessarily think that's the best solution. Looking at Ithaca's, one thing that I think if the council wants to follow in that formula, it really needs to sit down and figure out how it wants to separate the districts within the city. I don't think one entire district is going to work. I think you're going to need to take a look at the different areas and see what the different needs are for those areas, and then separate them into different improvement districts so that essentially you would have a budget and a schedule of repairs for each district on a yearly basis. It could be looked at. This is something that is similar to what Ithaca did. They divided their city into essentially 5 districts and excluded certain areas that were already very well maintained and did not actually require having to go through these types of repairs and maintenance. And one thing that I thought that Ithaca did a fairly good job of is its public outreach platforms. So it has essentially a storyboard that's linked to its city website, and it kind of walks you through what the legislation is, how many sidewalks are getting improved, how it's been progressing since it was first implemented a few years ago. And then it's also got on its city website, where you can find on one page, very well organized, its fact sheets, its assessment roles, and how the actual program works for the city. So if this is something that the council wants to move forward with, I definitely encourage this committee and then the broader council to go and take a look at how the city of Ithaca did with their public outreach pages, because I thought that was a very useful tool, more so than most of the other municipalities that I've seen who have implemented these similar programs. I think, at this point, Dominic, and I'd be curious to see what Michael's looked at too, because I think at this point, what the committee really needs to do is take a look at the legislation that's already been drafted and see how, make sure that that's still something that the committee and the council thinks will work for the city of Hudson. Start highlighting what areas they think might need to be amended or tweaked a bit, and start digging into how the city would be divided with individual districts, and kind of the order of priority for how those districts need to be repaired.
Yeah, I think, and I think, when you think about the districts, the things we have to balance are the DRI project coming in, new construction coming in, with new projects around the pocketbook factory, which should be incorporating, their sidewalks, or how they're going to, improve their sidewalks, and some of the other projects that come in to find a balance of how to separate the districts. I mean, I think the simple thing for a district, we have 5 wards, should we have 5 districts? I don't know, because a lot of the wards might not have a lot of sidewalks in there. I know some of the first ward, definitely some of the 5th wards don't. I think even some of the 3rd ward don't have sidewalks. So there, that's another thing too, is how to figure out, the balance and timing, because this is going to be a budget thing. So, District 1, District 2, however it's going to be, it's going to have to coincide with, the budget of the budget year. So, we're talking about, 3 to 5 year project, but ultimately, I'm thinking once this gets done, it's, the sidewalks that the city is going to be, transformed into a really serious walkable city. So, Michael, you have any thoughts on what you came across?
I don't really have anything to add on top of what Crystal already discussed. I also agree with her on it, because their use of ArcGIS story maps, which is the software that they use for their public engagement. I definitely think if we do pursue this route, we should consider utilizing that tool as well. It's a couple $100 a year. But anyway, I also agree with you, Dominic, that we have to be very cognizant of the timing of all of this. I think we do, it would serve us well to wait to hear what the result of our request for 2023 congressional funding for sidewalk improvements will end up being. Hopefully we find that out soon. But as some of you may know, Senator Gillibrand did put our project forward for $5 million for the sidewalk improvements. With her group of project proposals to Congress. So Yeah, I agree that we, in thinking about this, that there are still some pieces that are yet to be finished before we go about figuring out what our districts actually look like, because there's a lot of work, coming up, hopefully in the next year or two.
Yeah, and then also, I know, Chris, what you mentioned about the traffic, there's different, like assessments for high traffic areas on some of the laws, right?
Yeah, so Ithaca had separated theirs into, their assessments would be based on what was low traffic, what would be high traffic, what were vacant lots. They also had a category of double low. Now, when I did go back and pull up the legislation that had been looked at before previously by the city of Hudson, it looks like we did start incorporating that into the legislation that the city itself was looking at. So honestly, when I went back and kind of did a comparison with what was out there with the city of Ithaca and what we've got already drafted on the city of Hudson side, it's pretty darn close. So it's a matter of making sure that, those designations work for our city. And, going through that one more time with taking into consideration what Michael had just said, the new construction that's happening, as well as some of the projects that are occurring. I know City of Ithaca's does include with their assessments going through with their ADA, putting in ADA curbs and doing ADA upgrades as part of their assessments for the districts. So if that's actually happening now for part of our projects, it's something that we, would take into account as you're creating some of these districts.
Right. Now, Michael, with the $5 million grant, is that for a spread of city-owned sidewalks and residential sidewalks, property-owned sidewalks?
Yeah, it's a combination. It's basically the route that was studied as part of our ADA.
DOJ.
The report that we produced for DOJ.
Okay. Well, that definitely, gives us, another, component into moving forward into that settlement. And if we could land that, and then, DOJ definitely would be, happy in that regard. So now, is there any, Crystal, when we say districts, what, is there anything that sticks out that, does like a priority for a district, or how do you come across and develop what district is what district? Is it just a layout, geographic layout of the city?
Yeah, so it's, you would start with the geographic layout of the city and divide it into areas that would make, sense based on the types of lots that you've got in those areas, and the sidewalks, and obviously the existing sidewalks versus properties that don't have any sidewalks. And then from there, what you would probably do, the way I would look at it is doing priorities. So if you've got certain areas of the city that are, say, all residential, and they require significant repairs, you may put them into a certain district, and you might prioritize that district in the work that you're going to go ahead and move forward with in the next budget year. If you've got other areas where there are more minor repairs that are needed, and they're all contiguous to each other, you would consider putting that into a different district, especially if the property uses are somewhat similar. And again, working that way with how you're prioritizing. City Ithaca has 5 districts. It has 5 districts, but not all of its property is, again, in a district. There are certain areas they excluded based on how well maintained and the types of uses that correspond with those, with those sidewalk areas.
And also, because Ithaca has, a lot of schools now, the schools are also involved in the fees because because even though they probably don't pay taxes, but because it's a fee base, they have to pay the fee also, correct?
I believe that's true. I know that there are special assessments that city special assessments are not necessarily exempted for all nonprofits and for all uses. That's something that I would need to dig into a little bit further. I did get into like the assessor's manual today, and to try to find a little bit more about that. It would be worth a conversation too with the city assessor himself or herself, to kind of find out a little bit more information as to which ones would be exempted and which wouldn't be. But that's something I'm still digging into.
Okay. So in the meanwhile, gang, what I'm thinking about is, getting you what we have already that Crystal has been reviewing. So so we can go through and kind of do what she said, highlight, put some, marks, check marks or whatever for, really getting our hands, dirty, come August. Like I said, this is going to be, a long process, but, like Crystal said, there is some already legwork that has been done from the past legal committee. So, and with some of the things that, others have done wrong, we can then maybe eliminate some of the hassle or headaches. So is there any thoughts from anyone on the committee?
Dominic, I have a question.
Sure.
So is the choice of those areas, would it be of how bad the shape of them are, or
I think we should just
how-
bulldoze all the sidewalks and replace them with wooden planks.
hello? Who's this?
Hello,
We have a,
I'm Sir Timothy Jr., part of the newest sidewalk committee. I just think that we should be like patrolling the sidewalks with like a militant group to make sure no one's breaking them, and we should replace them with steel and bricks and make them.
Thanks, John, whatever your name was. Wow. Okay, Vicky, go ahead. I got a little distracted.
Yes, I was trying to say.
Hold on, Vicky.
What were you trying to say, Foo? What were you trying to say, Foo? Don't kick me
Hey,
again,
Mike.
Foo.
Mike, can we get rid of him? John, can we get rid of John, Mike? Thanks. Go ahead, Vicky.
So is that the criteria of how we're going to be choosing the areas? Would it be the most frequent use of pedestrians, or the worst shape of them? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to understand. It would be very hard to choose which areas are a priority, in my opinion.
I think what others have done was they kind of did a rating. Once you get your district, you kind of do a rating and, kind of like a grading system in what district is the worst to attack, first, and the ones that, like Crystal said, might need minor, that might be
Yes,
the last.
I understand that part, but there are areas I know from my ward or our ward where they're pretty bad shape, but they're not used as much. So do we actually make those a priority, or we make more the ones that they are used the most? And maybe they're equivalent, shape as the other ones. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think the ones that are used the most are going to be in the business district, obviously, because that gets the most foot traffic. So I guess it all depends on.
So it has to. So it does go down to the most pedestrian use, right?
Well, I guess what Chris was saying is that's how we want to determine it. If we want to say, the pedestrian use is going to be, the first one, priority is the higher use. I mean, how do you gauge it? Again, it'd be a grading system, I guess. What makes more sense statistically, I would just think, Warren Street, the business district, is the most use, and that probably will make sense, I guess, to do the high pedestrian area.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or thoughts? Crystal, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think you did. What I will do after the meeting is I will, I'll tag on to the email I sent to the committee back in March with just links to the Ithaca sites as well as attach the draft Hudson sidewalk district law that I had been looking at. And then that way everyone can start taking a look at those resources and get an idea of what's been looked at before by the committee and also what how Ithaca has been doing with their program.
Great, thank you. Is there any other thoughts, new business, or something you want to, anyone wants to bring up? Yes?
So I think where we got bogged down the last time legal committee was thinking about this was also talking about, Crystal referred to it already, but you know, the assessment and how we finance this. And my understanding back then was we thought one of the key factors was that properties that were non-tax-paying properties would actually be contributing to this. And then we had to worry, we were kind of dwelling on who actually has to pay in, what kind of, like if you've just had your sidewalk already done, do you get some kind of,
Credit?
how does that work? So I just hope we're attending to all these matters just as much as picking which district gets priority.
Yeah, I think once we get the district and then we can kind of figure out, how the policy within that district, is going to be approached. Like I said, if someone just moves in and they got their sidewalk, I know Ithaca, they got a tax credit. So they didn't have to pay, into the, into the assessment because they submitted a receipt, for the work, and I don't know, maybe, there, could be, how, others have paid through, longevity of the, stretching out make it more affordable. It depends how long the, fee is, the fee is, if it's 5 years or 10 years, how long that stretch over that property's ownership.
And the other two things were, one, hiring a company where you would get the economy of scale for doing all the sidewalks. And two, making this an ongoing and revolving sort of fund, not just a one-time thing.
Right, like every year you mean, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're constantly going, going to have to redo sidewalks every so often, I imagine. I don't know. Crystal, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that those are things too, Tom, that I did look at when I was going through Ithaca's and I was seeing what had been kind of worked into. And I don't know if the drafts that I'm looking at had been provided to the council or committee or if they're internal, because I have files from the prior attorney on it. But there absolutely were credits, and there are credits that are also being used by Ithaca, and you can see how they're being applied on their assessment roll. I went through their assessment roll to see how that was moving forward on it. And there is a time frame in which the property owners have to come in and request the credit. It's not on the city to do that. It's on the property owner to come in and prove that they're entitled to this credit, and they have to do it by a certain time in order to be able to get it. The other thing too with revolving, making sure that it's continuing to allow for continued maintenance, is where you're getting these annual assessments. So it's not just a matter of coming in for that initial cost to do the repair, but it's also for an annual, just like you would see for any other special district, an annual assessment that's being looked at and being charged based on, the frontage of the property, the foot traffic that property sees, and credits can be applied against that. So all of that was actually being worked into Ithaca's, and some of it is also worked into that draft policy I was looking at Hudson as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Crystal, it's
I
Peter.
think-
Just a question. I didn't see the Ithaca model myself personally, but was there any discussion in that regarding the types of materials, specifications for the new sidewalks versus existing sidewalks? For example, Hudson has many unique sidewalks. Some are slate, some are brick, some are different materials. How does Ithaca address that? And how do you suggest we might address that? Specifically in the business district, as most of us know, that at one point Hudson had Warren Street all red pavers, right? And that became a hazard at some point because of the material heaving, creating trip hazards. And so just some thoughts on that, please.
So I didn't dig into the material side on Ithaca, and if I recall correctly, when I was looking through it, I don't think they got into the types of material. Now that could be somewhere else in their code. This could just be in, I was just looking at the sidewalk district legislation that got it started. So I have to look into that a little bit further. And I guess with, suggestions for how the city of Hudson would work with that, I'd want to take a look to see what some of the other similar historic cities, how they've handled those situations and with improving their sidewalks. So I just have to look into that a little bit further.
Great. I personally think that might be a factor in this law here for us in the city of Hudson. Thank you.
I mean, that might be where the credit comes in, right? Because if you want to put special sidewalk in, at your cost, then you put it in at your cost using, whatever is zoned or, coded for. But, I can't see the city going and do customizing. So I think it would be, within time frame of, if you're going to do your own, here's your time frame and submit your credit for the sidewalk. That might be, an idea.
Right. We know that there is a standard in the code for sidewalks, but we also know there's historic districts. So I think the answer sort of sits in Peter's lap when when people change their sidewalk on their own. They have to go before, as we know from the recent circular, they have to go before to code to get approval to do it. And that would be, I imagine, how you would deal with that.
Right. Now, Krista also, mentioned, earlier on that, part of the assessment scale annually, because supplies and everything change, that, there might be a, kind of a rolling assessment, I guess, to incorporate on a certain basis to every year, some of these supplies, some of these products are going to be, more expensive as we go through this. What's going to be this year is not going to happen 4 years ago. So we're going to have to throw that in, incorporate that kind of rate scale, I imagine, to, compensate for the increase.
Well, and actually, to piggyback on that, Dominic, what I did see that Ithaca was doing was that they do a schedule of charges, which they look at on an annual basis and get submitted with the budget. So that's something that happens and gets looked at and gets augmented every single year.
Excellent.
Great. So that's great. That's great information. This is really, I think this is a good starting point. I think there's a lot of information here to absorb. And, if we don't have any other committee members having any questions, is there anyone in the public that has any thoughts, questions? Okay, now I guess John don't want to speak now. So, well, I mean, if there's not anything else, this is some really good thoughts to move forward. I think come August, again, this is going to be something that, we're going to put some time into this to come out right. And I really appreciate everybody on the committee and Michael and Crystal, what you've been contributing. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Ryan. Second?
I will, Vicky.
Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you very much. And I know we have a slow meeting week, and I guess I'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.